Hi everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Whisking Away with Diana J. I'm Diana, and today we are going to be making homemade bread. Now, I no longer purchase bread at the store. I normally make a loaf of bread at least once a week, and I wanted to show you this recipe today on this episode because, well, I ran out of bread. I ran out of bread and I needed to make bread. And I said, why not just pull my camera out and show you guys how I make it. A lot of times I do use my mixer to make bread. However, I wanted to show you my technique by kneading bread by hand, well, kneading dough by hand in order to make bread. Just in case, you know, a lot of viewers may not have mixers, so you'll have this video as a point of reference on how to do it by hand. So, with that being said, let's get our aprons on. I suggest you get your apron because it may get messy, and let's get baking. So excited to show you guys this recipe. Let's get at it. Okay guys, so first thing I need to do is activate my yeast. Now, the way you activate yeast is it needs to be added to warm water, about 110 to 115 degrees. If you do not have a thermometer, it's kind of like a baby's bath water, but just a tad warmer. I guess that's the closest way I can explain it. So what I am going to do is I'm going to use 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. I normally use active dry yeast. Now, to my yeast, I'm going to add sugar. Okay, so I'm just gonna let this sit and hang out for about 5 minutes. You'll know it's ready. It's gonna start like foaming, and you'll be able to smell the yeast. It does have a scent. So just 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay guys, so my yeast has activated. I have a wooden spoon. You're gonna need one of those to mix and stir everything in right before we start kneading the dough. So what I'm gonna do is I have my salt. I'm gonna add my salt into my flour now, because if I add my salt directly into my yeast, salt has the tendency to kill yeast, and if the yeast dies, then it will not rise our bread. So I add it into the flour. And what I'm going to do is, I have melted butter here. I'm gonna pour this directly in there. I'm adding the butter in there for flavor. That's really all I'm doing with that. So what I'm gonna do is I have about 4 cups and 4 1/2 cups of flour here. However, I only need 3 1/2 to 4 cups. I'm going to use the additional flour left over to knead the bread because it may stick to my working area here. So I have extra flour just in case I need it. I'm going to take a 1/2 cup at a time, add it in here, and just mix it with my wooden spoon. I'm going to add another 1/2 cup and mix it with my wooden spoon. Now, as we add flour, it's gonna get tougher and tougher to mix, and then we're gonna switch to our working surface, but now it is actually fine. Okay, so what I'm gonna add at this point is my milk powder. Milk powder helps make keep the bread soft, and it helps to keep the bread soft longer. So a lot of the times in bread recipes, you'll see people use milk powder or actual liquid milk in their recipes. And I'm gonna add another 1/2 cup of flour. Cool beans, looks good. Now, 3 cups. Now, here we go. I'm gonna have to put some arm muscle in it, right? I'm just gonna plop it on there. So I'm also gonna put a little bit of flour on my hands. Clean hands, make sure you're working with clean hands. I'm gonna knead the dough. And I'm using the bottom part of my hand to push it back into itself. I turn, I pull, and I push. And that's all kneading really is. And you're gonna do this for 15 minutes. Now, after a while, you'll realize you won't need to add additional flour on there. So that's when you know you're getting close. So we need to knead the dough. Try to say that 3 times fast. We need to knead the dough. We need to knead the dough to form the gluten in there. Now, gluten helps with the overall structure of the bread. So it forms like these little elastic type forms in the dough. Like if you take a little piece and you kind of stretch it a little bit, you'll be able to see like a kind of like a window pane, like it's kind of see-through, but not really. Pretty cool. And it does take some time. So you really do not want to rush this step. You do want to make sure you take your time. To be honest, the more love you put into the dough, the better it always tastes, right? You always want to cook and bake with love. It always makes the food taste better, right? Hi there, I'm back. So I finished with my dough. I just kind of tucked under here. Look at that, smooth. Pops right up. You want the dough to bounce right back up. It shouldn't stick to your hand, shouldn't feel sticky at all. It should be smooth like a baby's bottom. It really should. So, I'm gonna show you the next step. Okay, so I have some vegetable oil. I'm just gonna put about a tablespoon in there. I'm gonna use my pastry brush to spread the oil all over my bowl, to the sides and everywhere. Because we're gonna put our dough in here to rise, cover it with plastic wrap. Now it's going to rise and like double in form, so you wanna make sure that you oil it really well, or else trying to get it out, it's gonna be a pain. I'm gonna take my dough, I'm gonna place it in here, move my dough around, flatten it a little bit. And I'm gonna take my plastic wrap, and then, there's a lot going on over here. Just gonna cover it. Now, normally you would set this in a warm spot, draft free, to let it rise for an hour and a half, or until it is double in form. However, I have a trick. What I have going on behind me here is a saucepan with boiling hot water. What I normally do to cut the rising time in half is, in your oven you normally have 2 racks, right? So you're gonna take one of the racks, you're gonna place it on the very bottom shelf, and then your other rack should just put it on the second shelf. And then you're gonna put the saucepan on the bottom shelf, and then your bowl here on the top shelf. Not directly under. You're going to have one on the left and one on the right, right? Now, what this does is the steam that's coming from the hot boiling water, it's going to steam the oven. It's going to have a nice, comfy, cozy place for this dough to go, and it is going to quicken the rising process. So instead of waiting an hour to an hour and a half for it to rise or double in size, it's only going to take you 30 to 45 minutes. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what it looks like after it's done. This is what happens when you live in New York and you have no space for anything. Your oven becomes your storage. Welcome to Brooklyn. Now, my dough has been sitting in a nice, warm, cozy place in my oven. I forgot to tell you, please do not turn your oven on. Just leave it off and pop it in there. So it's been sitting in there, and as you can see, it has doubled, actually probably tripled in size, which is fine. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to put a little bit of flour on my working surface, just a little bit, just so it won't stick to the counter. I'm just going to flip this over and dump it right out. Now, remember we put that oil in there, and look at that. Look how easy it came out of the bowl, right? So this is awesome. I'm going to punch this down because I want the air to come out of it. So at this point, I am going to flatten it and try to take as much of the air bubbles out. Because what happens is, if you do not take the air bubbles out, you're gonna slice your bread, you're gonna have a little hole in there, or you're gonna have holes throughout the bread. Now, you could use a rolling pin if you like, but I'm just gonna use my hand to flatten it down. I have my loaf pan here. I want my dough to be the same length as the loaf pan because we're gonna roll it into a log and then we're gonna pop it right in there. Inside my loaf pan, I do have some, like you can see it, I do have some vegetable oil. So right before I plop it in there, I'm just gonna spread the vegetable oil throughout the pan with my brush here. And again, we do that so it does not stick. The worst thing, the last thing you want is to have a delicious loaf of bread there and then it won't come out. Literally, you will be taking a knife trying to pry the bread off of the pan. No one has time for that. You know how I am here with that. Cool beans. I'm telling you, by the end of like 15 episodes, you guys will be saying cool beans or awesome sauce or easy peasy. All right, this looks great. So we're just gonna roll it into a tight log. Just gonna squirt. And then when we get to the end of the log here, I'm just gonna pinch this together. Cool beans, my log. I'm gonna take my loaf here, it's about the same length. I'm gonna plop this seam side down. I'm gonna let this sit next to the hot oven while it preheats, and it's going to make it rise much quicker. You can let it sit aside and let it rise for about an hour, hour and a half. However, I like to save time, hence why I had the steam from the boiling water. Expedite the rising process. Okay guys, just look at this beauty. My kitchen smells amazing. It smells like a bakery. Just to let you guys know, I'm 20 minutes into the baking process of the bread. I just melted some butter and lightly brushed it on top. I didn't feel like doing an egg wash. I just melted some butter just to give it some color, and butter adds some flavor. So I'm ready to slice into this bad boy. Let's do it. I'm gonna use my bread knife. It has a serrated edge. It's the best knife to use whenever you're cutting bread. If I use a chef knife, then it's basically like you're pressing the bread down, opposed to a serrated knife. It kind of cuts through it nice and evenly. So I'm going to cut this side off. Oh, wow, that looks nice. So excited because I'm gonna make some tuna sandwiches tomorrow for lunch. Very excited about that. I just want to show you guys this beauty. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. Look. It looks so good. And then what I want to do is show you, this is what the gluten forms, the elasticness in the bread. Look how soft. Look how soft that bad boy is. I just want to taste. This is so good. Look. So soft. And delicious. It's really good. You guys have to try this at home. I'm telling you, once you make your first loaf of fresh bread, you're not gonna wanna go back. Yes, it takes time, but look at the end result. Just deliciousness. Homemade bread. Now, I'm gonna give you a tip. As soon as you cut it, and after you finish serving it and slicing it and all that good stuff, the remainder of the bread, you want to make sure that you seal it in you know, like a Ziploc bag or something, just to make sure that the air does not dry out your bread. sometimes even if I'm dealing with my daughter and, you know, in between slicing it, I'll just do it like that, so you know, the air wouldn't dry it out. I was so busy eating that slice of bread, I forgot to end the video. Well, that's all the time we have here for today. Thank you so much for whisking away with me, Diana. Until next time, guys, have a good one. Bye. Hey everyone, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Whisking Away with Diana J. If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up down below. And if you love this episode and this channel, I invite you to subscribe. I'll be posting up a new video every single week. This way, you won't miss a thing. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one.